Hey everybody, I'm Jake Snyder and this is 2DS from DS. I am coming to you guys just after WLPC. It's the day after and I am driving home to beautiful Boise, Idaho. It is finally not snowing. Left Phoenix, it was cold, and about an hour outside Phoenix it was snowing, and it's been snowing off and on since I left. So road's pretty good right now, but yeah, so if I stop suddenly, you'll know why. WLPC was pretty awesome. For those of you that don't know about WLPC, and I'm pretty sure most of my audience does, it's the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. It's usually always in February. This year there are 6. I'll see if I remember them. That's so Phoenix, there's Australia, Birmingham, in the UK, there is one in Prague, Dubai, and someplace I can't remember right now. Anyway, just come back from that. It was an exhausting week. It was I went to Vegas on Wednesday, picked up Brian Adsma, who was the last guest on the show. Went from Vegas to Phoenix on Thursday. Was in a deep dive kickoff on Friday. Basically got to sit through Lee Badman's, Bastion's, Jerry and Scott McDermott, and James Geringer's deep dive session, which were all really good. And then proceeded to follow that up with a 3-day boot camp, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, that I was teaching with Ryan. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, taught a deep dive each day. So it's been a pretty exhausting week. I am exceptionally tired. But one of the things that happened, a friend of mine, Curtis Larsen, was asking me about a thought about doing location designs and doing some less traditional things with an RTLS deployment. And so we were talking, and Wes Purvis from Cisco was there, and we were trying to, I'm like, I immediately, I think he kind of got the impression that I didn't like the idea, and I was like, it's not that I don't like the idea, and I kind of explained to him that there's a lot of things that can...
Heck, it's almost easier to...
Sorry, my audiobook just decided to start randomly playing. Anyway, one of the things that we kind of talked about was, well, you know, I didn't really like the idea of mixing AP models within a building for a number of reasons, and I thought that was a good topic. I think Luke Jenkins encouraged me to talk about this. Why I don't particularly like mixing AP models in a floor, in a building. And so that topic is what we're going to talk about today. First off, why don't I like mixing AP makes and models, or even just models within a manufacturer inside a floor or a building? And the answer is clients. You know, clients are dumb. They do stupid things that we don't think so. But one of the things that I particularly don't like about clients is that often they will take, when making roaming decisions, not the determination of when to roam per se, but about roaming candidate selection, like who they're going to roam to. Some of that has to do with AP capability set. Apple, as being one of the few that actually publishes when they roam, they actually have some preference in terms of capability set of the AP. I particularly hate this because it means you can't mix capability sets within an extended BSS across a building or a floor of a building. And the capability specifically that Apple preferences is channel width. So mixing 11N and 11AC APs, or just mixing channel width as a whole, can lead to some stickiness. And I actually did a test in our office. We have, at the time we had about 8 access points, and one of the things that I did was I took a handful of those APs and overrode the channel width. So 8 APs at 20 megahertz channels, and I flipped 3 of them to 40 megahertz channels. I proceeded to then pull the controller all day long, looking at which APs were on, which clients were on which APs. And the thing I noticed, as predicted, all of the iOS devices were always on one of those 3 APs. Now, I don't really have the coverage in the office to make it seamlessly roam, but it was so bad that they would preference it even though it was probably less than an ideal roam. Signal strength was probably a better indicator, and they would pick the wider channel simply because that's what they preferenced. So, flash forward to this idea of mixing APs in an RTLS environment. So there's a couple things historically we've seen, and I'm going to talk my experience with Cisco. It may not necessarily be the case in all manufacturers, but we saw back in the day, roaming from like an 1142 to a 3602, we saw some impact to roaming. And I remember having this discussion, this was years ago, with Stu and Sam, and both confirmed the same thing, that when you roamed from outside of a generational thing, that you could see harder roams. Roams that took longer, roams that didn't happen as seamlessly. Now that could be software, it could be some behavioral things with the client specifically, but that was kind of the case of, roaming outside of a generation typically is not recommended. The salt and pepper approach I never really like, and customers often, and this isn't Curtis, I get this request all the time, give me a high capacity AP for the conference room and give me a less, standard capacity AP for everywhere else. And I hate doing that because, same thing with people. It's like, oh, I want to put 40 megahertz channels on the AP in the conference room so I have more capability. Well, you do, but you also cause all the Macs around the conference room to gleam onto that one. So, for me, it's, pick the AP model that meets the requirements, and use that one throughout the facility. The other piece is in RTLS, when you're using the network to determine location, i.e. how the APs hear specific data packets in order to determine the location of the device. Antennas play a big part in that, and different antenna models have different patterns, and different patterns can lead to some complication with RTLS performance. So, assuming everything is even, everything is the same, it's much easier to do triangulation of RTLS than it is if you're putting different types of antennas in place. Now, that doesn't impact those types of RTLS deployments like the old Ekahau / Arista RTLS, where you're doing RF fingerprinting, but because they're taking that antenna pattern into account because they're measuring RSSI at the client level. But those are the considerations for this type of deployment I wanted to stress. The other topic that comes up with this is monitor mode. And the idea was to put in more APs and put them into monitor mode to increase, RTLS accuracy. So one of the things that I will say is that I like using monitor mode for these things, but there are some challenges, specifically around gaps. So if I have an AP on a channel and he's listening on that channel all the time, when those tags chirp data out, usually they'll chirp out 1.6.11. An AP in local mode that is just on a channel 1, he's going to hear the 1. Now he's not going to hear the 6 and 11. That's okay. When you have a monitor mode and that channel is hopping, let's say the AP is on channel 11 and he's scanning for a period of time, and the client transmits on channel 1. Client then moves to channel 6, and right about this time the AP moves from channel 11 to channel 1. Client finishes transmitting on 6, then transmits on 11, and by the time it's all said and done, that AP in monitor mode did not hear that client. Now, it's not all the time. Most of the time it works. But sometimes when their cycles overlap like that, you won't hear it. And so the reliability of RTLS with monitor mode is less than. Now, that's assuming you take the effort and you configure monitor mode on the AP to only scan 1, 6, and 11, because those are the only channels you're going to have your tag transmit on. So, you know, all of those things can kind of lead to some challenges around monitor mode. I think it's much more reliable to have APs on a channel and potentially servicing clients than it is to, say, have them scanning monitor mode. But you have to balance contention with, you know, with location accuracy. And I think that if your whole point is I'm just going to, I'm gonna do location with local mode APs and I'm gonna supplement with some monitor mode, I think I'm okay with that, because you're not relying on monitor mode for all your location. You're just trying to enhance it, and when you can enhance it, you will. The other piece was, you know, just mixing APs comes down to some supportability things. If you have 36s, 37s, 38s, 1800s all in the same environment, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. You know, I've beat the horse to death around code quality, but there are bugs, and often bugs impact a specific chipset or a specific AP. So a chipset will impact a 3700 but not a 38, especially since they're different architectures, they're different, you know, software platforms, they're different generations of radio. So you can run into these challenges where you'll experience a bug on one but not the others, and tracking down exactly which one is causing the problem can be really challenging. And when it comes to some of this, I feel that there's some complexity there that, you know, we may not want. So that was kind of my conversation with Curtis, and I thought that was worth having a discussion around. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts about mixing APs in general, or mixing AP models and antenna types in RTLS deployments. So I got a couple of the topics I'm going to talk about today, but I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Again, this is Jake Snyder, and you're watching 2DS from DS.